HOA Karen blocked my $200,000 grader. I was clearing the only ambulance route in. Why would an HOA Karen block a $200,000 grader? And what happens when that grader was clearing the only ambulance route in? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I am glad you are here with me for another story. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you for spending your time here and for continuing to watch and support the channel. Your support truly means a lot. Before we get started, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from and what time is it there right now? Now, let's get into the story. You can move those cones yourself, or you can explain them to the county in 43 minutes. Patricia Langford stood 20 feet in front of my grader with one hand wrapped around a coffee cup and the other resting on the hood of her white sport utility vehicle. Behind her, a second HOA vehicle sat sideways across Old Quarry Road. Orange cones filled the gaps. A temporary chain stretched between two portable posts. My $200,000 motor grader idled beneath me, diesel vibration rolling through the seat while the hydraulic system gave off its steady mechanical hum. The blade hovered 2 inches above the wet gravel. I looked at my watch. 5:47 in the morning. Patricia followed my eyes. What happens in 43 minutes? She asked. I leaned toward the open side window. That depends on whether you move your cars. Her mouth tightened. The storm had passed overnight, but everything still smelled like wet clay, pine needles, and diesel exhaust. Water trickled through the ditch beside the road. My headlights caught deep ruts running through the gravel ahead, some nearly 8 inches deep where runoff had carved through the shoulder. That was why I was there. Old Quarry Road needed its crown rebuilt, its drainage restored, and its washed-out sections leveled before the county could sign off on it. Patricia apparently had other plans. This is Cedar Ridge property, she said. You were told yesterday that heavy equipment is not authorized here. I glanced at the Orange County placard mounted behind my windshield. I was told a lot of things yesterday. Then you should have listened. I set the parking brake. Air hissed beneath the cab. Did you order this blockade? Yes. Personally, I am president of Cedar Ridge Estates. I do not need your permission to protect our roads. That answer was useful. I reached for my phone and photographed the 2 vehicles, cones, chain, Patricia, and the blue survey stakes standing beside the ditch. She noticed. Taking pictures will not change anything. I know. I took another photograph with my watch visible in the frame. 5:49. They just tell me when it happened. Patricia gave me the same expression people usually gave when they thought a contractor was trying to sound smarter than he was. I had seen it before. 25 years operating graders, dozers, excavators, and loaders had taught me that roads do not care about titles. Water follows grade. Gravel follows the blade. Property lines follow recorded maps. You can argue with all 3, but none of them move because your business card says president. I shut the grader down. The diesel rumble faded, leaving an abrupt silence over the road. Somewhere in the trees, water dripped steadily from the branches. Patricia smiled, as if turning off the engine meant surrender. Finally, she said. I climbed down, boots sinking slightly into the damp shoulder, and walked toward the nearest rut. I crouched beside it and pressed 2 fingers into the soft gravel. Too much moisture underneath. Another 20 minutes without grading, and I would lose part of the compaction window. I checked my watch again. 5:52. Patricia watched me. You really think somebody from the county is coming to rescue you? I stood and wiped the mud onto my work pants. No, then why do you keep checking the time? I looked down Old Quarry Road toward the section I had been hired to clear. Because at 6:30, this road is supposed to be ready for something that has nothing to do with your HOA. 3 days earlier, Old Quarry Road had looked less like a road and more like a drainage ditch somebody had accidentally driven through. The storm dropped nearly 4 inches of rain overnight, enough to cut channels through the gravel, soften both shoulders, and flatten the crown that normally pushed water toward the ditches. I arrived just after sunrise in my grader and stopped near the first blue survey stake. My name is Nathan Cooper, though everybody on a job site calls me Nate. I was 47, and I had spent 25 years moving dirt for a living. I started on a loader when I was 22, moved into excavation, learned drainage, and eventually discovered that a motor grader was the machine I understood best. A good operator does not just push gravel. He reads it. Tire tracks tell you where the surface is soft. Standing water tells you where the grade failed. A wash shoulder tells you which direction the storm tried to take the road. By the time I bought my own used grader for just under $200,000, I could usually tell what a road needed before I lowered the blade. Old Quarry Road needed almost everything. The county had hired Cooper Earthworks under an emergency maintenance order because storm damage had restricted the main eastern access road serving the area. My work order was clipped inside the cab. An Orange County placard sat behind the windshield. The instructions were simple: restore drainage, rebuild the crown, fill the deepest washouts, compact the travel surface, and have the route ready for inspection by 6:30 Thursday morning. That deadline was printed in bold. I started with the north ditch. The blade scraped across wet gravel with a low metallic growl, rolling loose stone toward the center line. Hydraulic cylinders hissed every time I adjusted the angle. Small rocks clicked beneath the tires. The smell of wet earth came through the open window. By noon, the first half-mile was already shedding water correctly. That was when the white sport utility vehicle appeared. It came around the curve slowly, spotless despite the mud, and stopped beside my grader. Patricia Langford stepped out wearing sunglasses, clean boots, and a jacket that looked too expensive for a road crew. She held a coffee in one hand and a thick HOA binder in the other. I lowered the engine speed. "Can I help you?" She looked at the grader, then at the fresh windrow of gravel. "Who authorized this?" I pointed at the orange placard behind the windshield. "County Roads Division. This is Cedar Ridge Estates." "That is the neighborhood." I nodded toward the gravel beneath us. "I am asking about the road." Her expression hardened. "Old Quarry Road is private." I reached beside my seat and pulled out the county work order. Then somebody forgot to tell the county. She did not take it. Instead, she looked at the blue survey stake beside the ditch and then back at me. "Heavy equipment requires HOA approval. County maintenance does not." Patricia lifted her phone and photographed my grader. Then she photographed my company name on the door. "You will receive formal notice." I had been threatened with paperwork before. Paper never bothered me. Bad drainage did. I returned the work order to the cab and lowered the blade. Patricia stayed long enough to watch me make another pass before driving away. By 4 that afternoon, her first email reached my office. It called my grader unauthorized commercial equipment and ordered me to stop work immediately. I printed the notice, placed it beside the county work order, and circled one sentence Patricia had written herself: "Cedar Ridge Estates maintains exclusive control over Old Quarry Road." Then I looked at the blue survey coordinates on the county map. Patricia had made a very confident claim. The road records were about to tell me whether she had made a very expensive one. The road records answered me before breakfast the next morning. I was sitting in my office with coffee cooling beside the keyboard when the county parcel map loaded across my screen. Old Quarry Road cut along the western edge of Cedar Ridge Estates, but the line Patricia had called private did not stop at the subdivision boundary. A recorded emergency access easement followed the road from the county connector all the way through the storm-damaged sector. I zoomed in until the survey coordinates matched the blue stakes I had seen beside my grader. Same corridor, same road, same authority. I called Michael Torres, the county road supervisor listed on my work order. "Michael, I have an HOA president claiming exclusive control over Old Quarry Road." Papers shuffled on his end. "Patricia Langford? You know her. She called yesterday. Wanted your grader removed." I leaned back. "What did you tell her?" "That you are working under county authorization." "Did she ask about the easement?" I explained it. That changed the situation. Patricia was no longer acting without information. She had been given the information and decided she preferred her own version. At 7:10, I emailed her the recorded easement, the maintenance order, and the county route map. I kept the message short. Old Quarry Road remained open to authorized county and emergency access. Cooper Earthworks would continue scheduled restoration. Her reply arrived 11 minutes later. "Cedar Ridge rules prohibit disruptive commercial operations regardless of claimed easements." Claimed easements. I printed that sentence. By 8, I was back in the grader. The storm clouds had cleared, but the road still held moisture beneath the surface. I angled the blade and pulled loose gravel from the shoulder toward the center. Steel scraped stone. Hydraulic cylinders hissed. A gray ribbon of material rolled along the blade before settling into the low spots. Behind me, the road looked cleaner with every pass. Around 9:30, I noticed something new near the Cedar Ridge entrance. A rectangular sign stood beside the road, "Private Road." Cedar Ridge residents only. The wooden posts were fresh enough to show pale saw cuts, and the concrete around their bases had not fully cured. I stopped beside the nearest blue survey stake and compared its position with the sign. The sign had been placed just inside the county access corridor. I photographed both in the same frame. Patricia arrived 20 minutes later. "You saw the sign," she said. "Hard to miss. Then there should be no further misunderstanding." I pointed toward the blue stake. "When was that installed?" She ignored the question. "You need to remove your equipment." "Patricia, that sign does not change the recorded easement." Her jaw tightened. "Homeowners bought here for privacy." That word caught my attention. Privacy. Not safety. Not road damage. Privacy. Later that afternoon, I stopped at a listing box near the entrance and took one of the glossy brochures. Patricia's photograph appeared beneath the Caldwell and Langford Realty logo. 3 homes inside Cedar Ridge were being marketed through her office. Across the center of the brochure, silver lettering promised exclusive, gated privacy with no through traffic. I looked through the windshield at Old Quarry Road stretching past the subdivision. A permanent county emergency easement was not exactly compatible with that sentence. Suddenly, the fresh private road sign made more sense. Patricia was not simply trying to stop noise from my grader. She was trying to make the physical road match the story printed in her sales material. That evening, I sent her one final email. "Please confirm whether you are directing Cooper Earthworks to stop county-authorized grading on Old Quarry Road, and whether you are asserting HOA authority over the county emergency access easement." Her answer arrived at 8:43. 2 words appeared beneath each question. "Yes, correct." I printed the email, clipped it behind her brochure, and placed both beside my work order. Then I checked Thursday's deadline again. 6:30 in the morning. Patricia had now put everything in writing. All that remained was to see how far she was willing to take it. Wednesday morning gave me exactly the kind of weather a damaged gravel road needed. Cool air, no rain, and enough moisture trapped beneath the surface to let the material bind without turning to mud. I was on Old Quarry Road before 6, working the final mile toward Cedar Ridge. The grader blade floated at a shallow angle, shaving high spots and carrying gravel into the ruts left by the storm. Every few hundred feet, I stopped and checked the crown. 2% toward the shoulders. Enough to move water without making the road uncomfortable to drive. The machine spoke through the controls if you paid attention. A light vibration meant loose stone. A heavier pull meant the blade had found wet material underneath. By 7:15, the drainage ditch was flowing cleanly again. I should have been thinking only about Thursday morning's inspection. Instead, Patricia kept adding paper to my folder. At 8:12, another email arrived accusing me of creating excessive noise. At 9:26, she sent a dust complaint even though the road was still damp enough that my tires barely raised any. At 10:40, she attached an HOA vehicle policy written for residential streets inside Cedar Ridge and claimed it applied to my grader. I saved every message. Then Michael Torres called. "Nate, did Patricia send you another stop work notice?" 3 messages before lunch. She called our office again too. What is she asking for now? She wants the county to acknowledge Cedar Ridge control over the road. I looked through the windshield at a blue survey stake standing beside the ditch. "And we declined. Put that in writing for me." Michael paused. "Already doing it." The confirmation reached my inbox 20 minutes later. I printed it from the portable printer in my service truck and added it behind Patricia's emails. County emergency access rights remained in effect. Cooper Earthworks remained authorized. Cedar Ridge had no authority to terminate the work order. Clean. Simple. Recorded. Around noon, Patricia arrived with another woman from the HOA board. I shut down the grader and climbed out. Patricia held a document toward me. "This is your final notice." I read the first line. It ordered all heavy equipment off Old Quarry Road by 5 that afternoon. "Did the board approve this?" I asked. The other woman looked at Patricia before Patricia answered. "As president, I can issue enforcement directives." That was not my question. Patricia pulled the paper back. "You have been notified." I took out my phone. "Then I want to make sure I understand. You are ordering me to stop a county-authorized road restoration project before tomorrow morning's inspection?" "Yes." "And you are still asserting that Cedar Ridge controls this road?" "Absolutely." The board member beside her shifted uncomfortably. I photographed the notice. Patricia turned toward her vehicle, but I called after her. "One more thing. If you intend to physically block the grader tomorrow, put that in writing too. She stopped. If necessary, we will prevent unauthorized equipment from entering. Thank you. She drove away. I watched the white sport utility vehicle disappear around the curve, then looked at my watch. 12:18. I still had hours of grading left, and I used every one of them. By sunset, most of Old Quarry Road was restored. Only the final storm-damaged section near Cedar Ridge remained. I parked the grader at the approved staging point and walked the unfinished stretch with my boots sinking into the soft shoulder. Maybe 45 minutes of blade work. An hour at most. Back at the cab, I checked the work order again. Thursday, 6:30 in the morning. Route ready for county inspection. Before leaving, I placed the Orange County placard where nobody could miss it and photographed the grader beside the blue survey stake. At 9:14 that night, Patricia sent one final email. Cedar Ridge will enforce its access restrictions tomorrow morning. I saved it without replying. She thought she was warning me. What she had actually done was schedule the next piece of evidence. Thursday morning began with headlights cutting through mist and the grader blade already touching gravel. I reached Old Quarry Road at 5:23, climbed into the cab, and started the diesel. The engine settled into a deep idle while the gauges came alive. 45 minutes of work remained if nobody interfered. I eased forward, lowered the blade, and watched wet gravel roll smoothly toward the center line. The road was responding exactly the way I wanted. At 5:38, I finished the first damaged section. At 5:42, I rounded the curve toward Cedar Ridge and saw red taillights ahead. Patricia had kept her promise. Her white sport utility vehicle sat sideways across the road. A second HOA vehicle blocked the opposite shoulder. Orange cones filled the remaining space, and a lightweight chain stretched between two portable posts. Patricia stood beside it holding coffee and a folder. I stopped 20 feet away. The blade hovered above the gravel. 5:47. You can move those cones yourself, or you can explain them to the county in 43 minutes. She asked what happened at 6:30. I gave her the only answer she needed. That depends on whether you move your cars. She refused. I photographed the blockade, confirmed she had personally ordered it, and shut down the grader. The sudden silence made the dripping trees sound louder. At 5:54, I called Michael Torres. The route is physically blocked. By whom? Patricia. 2 vehicles, cones, and a chain. Do not move anything yourself. Was not planning to. I sent him the photographs. Then I called the county dispatch number printed on my work order and reported the delay. At 6:01, Patricia walked closer. Calling the county will not change private property rights. You should probably save that sentence for them. At 6:04, Michael's county pickup appeared at the far end of the road. Patricia smiled when she saw it. I think she genuinely believed he had come to remove me. Michael parked outside the blockade, stepped out with a document tube, and looked at the grader. Then he looked at Patricia's vehicles. Who set this up? Cedar Ridge did, Patricia said. Under my authority. Michael checked his watch. 6:06. You need to clear the road. Patricia opened her folder. This is private HOA property. Michael pulled out the recorded easement map. No, it is not. She started talking about residential restrictions, but another vehicle appeared before she finished. White body. County seal. Rachel Foster from Emergency Medical Services stepped out carrying a route binder. I had never met her before, but Michael had mentioned that someone from emergency operations would be present for the 6:30 inspection. Patricia looked at the county vehicle, then at me. Why is Emergency Medical Services here? I did not answer. Rachel walked directly to Michael. How much remains unfinished? About 3/4 of a mile, I said. 45 minutes under normal conditions. Rachel checked her watch. 6:12. Her expression changed, not dramatically, just enough to tell me the clock mattered to her too. She opened the binder and looked down Old Quarry Road. Patricia stepped closer. This equipment is violating Cedar Ridge restrictions. Rachel looked at her. This equipment is restoring a county-designated access route. Patricia frowned. For what? Rachel did not answer immediately. She turned to Michael instead. Has the Eastern Road restriction changed? No. Weight limitation remains active. Rachel nodded once and opened the binder to a marked page. 6:15. I stood beside my silent grader while water dripped from the blade onto the gravel. Patricia had spent 3 days trying to stop my machine. Now she was finally standing beside the people who knew why it had to finish, and she still had 15 minutes before the deadline to understand exactly what she had blocked. At 6:16, Rachel Foster laid her route binder across the hood of Michael's county pickup and turned it toward Patricia. A highlighted line ran through Old Quarry Road from the western connector to the Cedar Ridge sector. Patricia stared at it without speaking. "The storm damaged the eastern approach," Rachel said. "Until engineering removes the weight restriction there, this corridor is the only approved ambulance access route into this service area." Patricia looked from the map to my grader. "You are saying ambulances actually use this road?" "I am saying they must be able to use it," Rachel replied. "That is why the county ordered it restored and inspected." Michael unrolled the recorded easement map beside her binder. The blue survey coordinates matched the stakes along the ditch. He tapped the line with one finger. "Permanent emergency access easement. Cedar Ridge does not own this corridor, and the association cannot close it." Patricia's face tightened. "But residents were promised controlled access." I walked to my service truck, retrieved my folder, and returned with the glossy real estate brochure. I placed it beside the county map. "Exclusive gated privacy. No through traffic." Patricia immediately recognized it. "That is marketing language." "Exactly," I said. Then I placed her signed stop work notice beside it. "And this is an enforcement order." Next came her email confirming that she was directing me to stop county-authorized grading. Michael read it once and looked at her. "You received the easement documentation before sending this?" Patricia folded her arms. "I believe the HOA still had authority over activity affecting the community." Rachel checked her watch. 6:21. "Belief does not make the road passable." That sentence changed the entire conversation. Until then, Patricia had treated the dispute like a contest over who could produce the strongest letterhead. Rachel reduced it to what the road actually was, unfinished. 3/4 of a mile still needed grading. The shoulders were soft. 2 washouts needed material pulled back into the travel lane. The crown near the southern curve was not ready for inspection. Every minute we spent debating ownership was another minute my blade was not touching gravel. At 6:23, a sheriff's department vehicle arrived. Deputy Aaron Mitchell stepped out, spoke briefly with Michael, then examined the blockade. He did not raise his voice. He simply asked Patricia whether both vehicles belonged to Cedar Ridge representatives. "Yes," she said. "Then they need to be moved from the county emergency access corridor." Patricia looked at the chain, then towards several residents who had begun watching from the subdivision entrance. Her confidence was disappearing in small pieces. "I want the HOA attorney contacted." "You can contact your attorney," Michael said. "The road still has to be cleared." 6:25. Patricia finally handed her keys to the second board member who had arrived with her. The first vehicle moved. Then the second. Aaron removed the lightweight chain while Michael carried the cones to the shoulder. I climbed into the grader. 6:27. When I turned the key, the diesel engine came back with a deep rumble that rolled through the wet morning air. Rachel stepped beside the cab. "Can you finish by 6:30? "No. I was not going to pretend 3 minutes could replace 45. "Then we activate the temporary contingency route until you are done," she said. "Do it." 6:30 arrived with my grader moving again, not with a manufactured miracle. Rachel radioed the temporary routing plan while I lowered the blade. Steel met gravel with a long scraping growl. Whetstone rolled across the moldboard. Behind me, the first damaged section flattened into a clean travel surface. Patricia stood beside the entrance watching the machine she had blocked less than an hour earlier. The deadline had passed, but the work had restarted. More importantly, everyone now knew why the clock mattered. She had thought she was stopping a contractor from crossing her neighborhood. What she had actually stopped was the machine preparing the only road an ambulance could reliably use until the other route reopened. Once the grader started moving again, I stopped thinking about Patricia and went back to reading the road. The first washout sat just beyond the southern curve, where stormwater had carried nearly 6 inches of gravel toward the ditch. I angled the blade, lowered the left edge, and pulled the loose material back toward the travel lane. Whetstone rolled across the moldboard in a steady gray wave. The hydraulic system hissed every time I adjusted the pitch. Behind me, Michael walked the shoulder with a measuring rod while Rachel remained near her county vehicle coordinating the temporary ambulance routing plan. Nobody rushed me. That mattered. A road built in panic is usually a road somebody has to repair twice. At 6:43, I reached the second washout. The material underneath was softer than I expected, so I made 2 lighter passes instead of 1 deep cut. Patricia remained near the Cedar Ridge entrance with 3 HOA board members. I could see them talking whenever I turned the grader around. She kept pointing toward the road. They kept looking at the county map Michael had left on the hood of his pickup. At 6:58, one of those board members, a gray-haired man named Robert Hayes, walked toward Michael. I could not hear their conversation over the engine, but 10 minutes later Robert approached me while I was checking the shoulder. "Mr. Cooper, did Patricia receive notice that this was a county easement before this morning?" he asked. "Yes." I wiped gravel dust from my gloves and opened the document folder in my service truck. County map, written confirmation, and my work authorization. She received all 3. I showed him the email timestamps. Robert read them carefully. Then he saw Patricia's response asserting HOA control. "May I photograph this?" "Absolutely." He took several pictures and walked back toward the other board members. At 7:16, Michael received a call from county engineering. He listened for less than a minute, then waved Rachel over. When they finished, he came to me. "Engineering wants a documented inspection as soon as you finish. They also want photographs of the blockade and the private road signs." I nodded toward the fresh sign near Cedar Ridge. "That one is sitting inside the easement." We noticed. At 7:32, the final crown began taking shape. I made 1 pass east, another west, then feathered the shoulders so runoff would reach the restored ditches instead of cutting through the road again. The grader tires left clean impressions behind me. No standing water. No deep ruts. No loose ridge down the center. I climbed down and walked the last quarter mile with Michael. My boots made a soft crunch over the compacted surface. "This will work," he said. "Let us verify it." Rachel called for the route inspection vehicle. While we waited, Robert approached Patricia with 2 other board members. Their voices stayed low, but I heard one sentence clearly. "You told us this was HOA property." Patricia answered something I could not make out. Robert held up his phone, showing the photographs of her emails. She stopped talking. At 7:48, a county utility vehicle drove the entire restored section at normal speed. Michael followed, checking drainage and shoulder stability. Rachel signed the temporary access verification at 7:56. The contingency routing ended minutes later. Then Michael walked to the private road sign Patricia had installed and photographed the fresh concrete around its posts. "County Property Division will handle this," he said. Patricia stepped forward. "You cannot just remove community signage." Michael looked at the blue survey stake beside it. "The sign is inside a recorded emergency access corridor. Your board can discuss that with County Council." Robert turned toward Patricia. "Actually, our board is going to discuss several things first." He asked the other HOA members to meet at the clubhouse that afternoon for an emergency review of her enforcement actions. Patricia looked at me as if I had engineered the entire situation. I had not. I had graded a road and saved my paperwork. That was all. I climbed back into the grader and looked through the windshield at the Orange County placard. 3 hours earlier, Patricia had tried to make that machine stop because she believed the road belonged to whoever could block it. Now the grader was moving, the route was verified, and her own board was finally asking the question she should have asked before sunrise. Who actually had the authority to close it? By 3 that afternoon, the gravel on Old Quarry Road had dried from dark gray to pale brown, and the Cedar Ridge clubhouse parking lot was fuller than I had ever seen it. I had not planned to attend the board meeting until Robert Hayes called and asked me to bring the original county work order and every message Patricia had sent. When I walked inside, the air smelled like coffee, printer toner, and damp jackets left over from the morning. Patricia sat at the center of the long table with her HOA binder closed in front of her. Robert sat 2 seats away. Michael Torres was there with the recorded easement map, and Rachel Foster had brought the emergency routing documents. I took the chair nearest the door and placed my folder on the table. Robert began without ceremony. "We need to establish what happened and what authority was used." Patricia immediately answered. "I acted to protect Cedar Ridge from unauthorized commercial traffic." Michael unrolled the county map. "The traffic was authorized." Patricia looked toward him. "The HOA has always treated Old Quarry Road as private. Treatment does not change a recorded easement," Michael said. Robert asked me for the first notice. I handed it over. Then the second. Then Patricia's email confirming that she was ordering me to stop county-authorized grading. Each page carried a date and timestamp. Finally, I placed the glossy real estate brochure beside them. Exclusive gated privacy. No through traffic. Robert looked at Patricia. Were these properties being marketed through your brokerage while you were issuing these enforcement notices? My business has nothing to do with this. Then why does the brochure promise something the county records say the HOA cannot guarantee? Patricia did not answer immediately. Rachel opened her route binder. There is another issue. At 6:30 this morning, Old Quarry Road was scheduled to become the primary approved ambulance access route for this sector, while the eastern approach remained under a weight restriction. Because the grader was blocked, we activated a temporary contingency plan until the road could be completed and verified. One board member leaned forward. Was anyone left without ambulance service? No, Rachel said. The contingency system worked. But resources were redirected unnecessarily. That distinction mattered. Nobody exaggerated what happened. Nobody needed to. Patricia had delayed work on an emergency access route after receiving documents explaining that the road was under county authority. Robert opened the HOA bylaws. I also cannot find language allowing the president to physically close disputed property without board authorization. Patricia straightened. I believed immediate enforcement was necessary. Did you ask the board? No. Did you ask county council? No. Did you disclose that you were marketing homes using controlled access as a selling point? The room went quiet. Patricia looked down at her binder. Robert closed the bylaws. The board requested a private session. 20 minutes later, they called us back. Patricia returned last, carrying her binder against her chest instead of setting it on the table. Robert stood. Effective immediately, Patricia's independent enforcement authority was suspended pending a formal review. Any future restriction involving roads, easements, contractors, or county property would require board approval and documented jurisdiction. The HOA would also cooperate with county property officials regarding the incorrectly placed private road signs and review whether Patricia's real estate interests created a conflict in her decisions. Nobody applauded. I was glad they did not. This was not a victory parade. It was paperwork finally catching up with a bad decision. Outside, Michael walked with me toward my grader. The evening sun reflected off the blade, highlighting scratches left by years of gravel and stone. County wants one final route verification tomorrow morning, he said. What time? 6:30. I smiled and climbed onto the step. Patricia had spent days trying to make Old Quarry Road look private. Tomorrow morning, the road itself was going to provide the final answer. At 6:12 the next morning, I parked the grader on the shoulder of Old Quarry Road and climbed down into air that smelled like pine, damp gravel, and cool engine metal. The sky was clear for the first time since the storm. Yesterday's tire impressions were still visible across the finished surface, but there were no deep ruts, no standing water, and no loose ridge waiting to catch a wheel. The crown ran cleanly toward both shoulders, and the restored ditches carried the last runoff away from the travel lane. I walked to the blue survey stake near Cedar Ridge and stopped beside the empty holes where the private road sign had stood. County property crews had removed it before sunrise. Across the entrance, Patricia's real estate signs were still there, but the promise of exclusive controlled access had disappeared from the updated brochures in the listing boxes. At 6:21, Michael Torres arrived with a county inspection vehicle. Rachel Foster followed a few minutes later in an emergency medical services unit. She stepped out carrying the same route binder Patricia had stared at the morning before. Ready? Michael asked. Road is ready, I said. He drove the inspection vehicle slowly through the full restored section while I followed in my service truck. We stopped twice so he could check the shoulders and drainage. At the southern curve, he pressed his boot into the compacted gravel and nodded. At 6:28, we reached the western connector. Rachel checked her watch. Then she spoke into her radio and requested the scheduled route verification. 2 minutes later, exactly at 6:30, an ambulance entered Old Quarry Road. No lights, no siren, no emergency, just a normal route test to confirm that the vehicle could travel the corridor safely while the eastern approach remained restricted. I stood beside my grader as it passed. Its tires rolled over the gravel with a steady crunch. It crossed the section where Patricia had parked her sport utility vehicle less than 25 hours earlier, continued past the blue survey stake, and disappeared around the curve. Michael signed the inspection sheet against the hood of his truck. Approved for emergency access. 5 words. That was all the road needed. Over the next several weeks, Cedar Ridge completed its internal review. Patricia was removed as HOA president, and the board adopted a written policy requiring verified ownership or easement authority before any future road restriction could be issued. The county confirmed the permanent emergency access corridor in writing and replaced the misleading private road signage with proper utility and emergency access markers. The HOA also separated real estate marketing interests from enforcement decisions involving shared access. I was paid for the original grading contract and the documented standby time caused by the blockade. I never asked Patricia for an apology. I did not need one. Roads have a useful way of settling arguments without speaking. A map establishes where they belong. A grader makes them passable. The people who need them reveal why they matter. A month later, the eastern approach reopened and Old Quarry Road returned to being what it had been before the storm. A quiet gravel corridor most residents barely noticed. My grader moved on to another county job 27 miles away. Before I left Cedar Ridge for the last time, I stopped beside the blue survey stake and looked down the road. The blade behind me was scratched from stone, its cutting edge polished bright along the bottom. Patricia had spent days trying to prove that authority came from a gate, an HOA title, and a private road sign. 25 years in dirt work had taught me something simpler. Water follows grade. Property follows records. Emergency access follows the people responsible for keeping it open. Justice did not need a courtroom that morning. It needed 12 feet of gravel, a county map, and a grader blade set at the right angle.